All right. Well, with that, I'm so thrilled for the chance to get this going today. Oh, actually, Vern, I'm going to stop your screen share for a
Okay.
moment, and then I'll get things going. There we go. All right. So welcome everyone to Native Plant Gardens 101. My name is Matthew Bertrand with Friends of the Rouge. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, you're here because you are ready to do things differently in your home landscape. You are here because you're interested in Michigan gardens with Michigan plants in them, plants that are giving us a sense of space, a sense of place, that are pure Michigan. We want our home landscapes to be pure Michigan as well. You're here because you want to be promoting pollinators in your home landscapes, birds, bees, butterflies. You're here because you want to become more knowledgeable about how to get all this done. How do you get started with native plant gardening in your own home space and in your community? So you are in the right space for all of that, and we're very glad to have you here. I'm going to do a little welcome and introduction, and then we will pass it on to Vern, our presenter here today. So you're here for Native Plants 101. Again, Vern Stevens with Designs by Nature is going to be our instructor today. My name is Matthew Bertrand. I'm a senior restoration coordinator with Friends of the Rouge. And a little bit about Friends of the Rouge before we get started. And For those of you that were with us yesterday, you've already heard this, so I'm sorry to put this to you again, but hopefully you'll learn something a little bit new and different. Friends of the Rouge is a nonprofit organization. It's been around since 1986, located here in Southeast Michigan. And on this map that you see on the left, the little white outline in the bottom right corner of that map there, that is the watershed for the Rouge River, the lands that drain to the four main branches of the Rouge. It's about 487 square miles. And from the land cover type that you can see, that's the color showing up here, that's urban areas. So you can see that the Rouge is largely urbanized. It's our most urbanized river in the state of Michigan and one of the most urbanized rivers in the entire country. And the Rouge has it has given a lot to Southeast Michigan communities. And People have a lot of feelings about the Rouge. I am not sure I'm actually successfully sharing my screen right now. I just realized I've been showing some slides, and yep, I see people typing in about not being able to see the map. I thought that might have been an issue. So hopefully that'll be our only technical issue today. I will correct that. There, now you should be able to see it. My apologies for that issue. Um, so now you can see that map right there, and the white outline in the bottom right, the red are the urban areas. So hopefully you'll have caught up with me on that. Sorry again for that issue. So I was saying that the Rouge is a river that has given so much to communities, not just here in Southeast Michigan, but to all of Michigan, to the United States, to the world as well. This is the river on which the automobile was born with Henry Ford's River Rouge plant. It's the river that built the arsenal of democracy through World War I, World War II, helped the world through that turbulent time. It's a river that is promoted growth throughout the Metro Detroit region for centuries now. It's the reason why Michigan was founded in part along the Detroit River, the Rouge River there. It was a key settlement area, and it's now one where a significant majority of Michigan's residents live. So an incredibly powerful and important river. And it's one that is a part of giving us so many gifts. It's seen some rough times, and a lot of people have perspectives on the Rouge, and so now is a great time. Feel free to type into the chat anything you'd like to share about the Rouge, about your history with it, the goods, the bads, whether it's your memories of playing along the banks as a kid, or maybe it's your memories of the river smelling so bad you had to close your windows. It's seen it all. People have had innumerable experiences with the river. There were periods where it ran orange from the industrial pollution. There were periods where oil slicks on top of the river were so thick it covered up the orange. The river caught fire in 1969. It was one of 4 urban rivers that caught fire, and that fire, for as bad as it was, helped to trigger the Clean Water Act, which has helped rivers all across the United States to clean up. And the Rouge was also one of the major beneficiaries of that Clean Water Act. The picture on the top right that is thankfully now showing shows a kayak trip on the River Rouge. You can see the Ford Rouge plant in the background there. So this is right in the heart of the industrial stretch of the river. We've been taking folks out on the river for over a decade now. It's now a safe activity, and we at Friends of the Rouge believe that pure Michigan should not be a 4-hour drive away from our communities here in Southeast Michigan. It's something that we should have right here in our own backyards, and that guides a lot of our work as we work to restore this urban river. We are actually building a water trail right now on the lower stretch of the Rouge, a 27-mile stretch from Canton down to Melvindale, to the heart of the Detroit River, the mouth of the Detroit River. And our restoration efforts are a key part of that as well. So the picture on the bottom right is showing hundreds of people that come out for Rouge Rescue every year. But there's so many ways to be involved. Your little native plant garden in your home is a really important part of Rouge River restoration because the river is so urbanized. Our gardens are our nature here in Southeast Michigan in part. So your native plant garden, your rain garden, the things you're doing at home are really defining in part the nature that we have in Southeast Michigan. And so your efforts at your home are a really important part of this. So that's a little bit about Friends of the Rouge, who we are. I want to just situate us in the week before I pass it along to Vern. So this is Earth Week this week. We invite you all to transform your world, and starting with your hometown river here in the Rouge. We had Pollinators 101 yesterday. The recording is now available. Here is the native plant gardening today. Tomorrow we're doing Rain Barrels 101 and Friday Rain Gardens 101. These will all be recorded. If you're interested in getting your hands dirty, we've got tree planting projects going on all week. For the weekend, there's cleanup events, all kinds of activities taking place. So make sure to visit therouge.org to see what's happening and find out how you can get involved. And we are offering door prizes for your participation in all these activities. And so the more activities that you participate in, the more chances to win you will have. We're offering native plant kits from Design by Nature, the Vern's company, as well as rain barrel starter kits to celebrate your efforts and celebrate your joining us here today. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Vern Stevens. I'm so thrilled for the honor to have Vern with us today. Vern is the owner of Designs by Nature. It's a native plant nursery and landscaping company about in the middle part of the state. And this is our second year at Friends of the Rouge, working with Vern as the lead provider for our native plant sales. And Vern is a leader in the native plant movement here in the state of Michigan. He's a leader and an educator. He's been a board member for the Wildflower Association of Michigan for years. He's a major leader in the Native Plant Guild, which is helping young native plant nurseries get established here in Michigan, growing the next generation of native plant leaders. He has helped innumerable residents, supporting them to make their homes better places for native plants and for wildlife. He's got a BA in zoology. He was a former US Air Force pilot. He's retired from the DNR Wildlife Division, and there he specialized in grasslands and invasive species management. Vern has a wealth of information to share with us today, and so I hope you will join me. And I know you can't hear them, Vern, but everyone's giving you a round of applause to welcome you today for your presentation. So with that, Vern, feel free. I'm going to stop my share. Go ahead and you can share your screen when you're ready. And while you're getting it ready, I see Lucia has a question. Where will the recordings be found? We will email everyone who's participating a copy of the recording at the end.
Okay, so it's all mine now?
It's all yours, Vern. Take it away.
Well, thanks for everybody for coming. And it's nice to be inside. It's nice to be warm again. Finally, the sun has come out, and I think we're breaking this curse of winter with some sunshine and warm temperatures. So things will start growing here rather quickly. This is our 25th year of operation. Quite surprising to me that we've been around that long, But it's been a wonderful journey because we've done so much as far as expanding throughout the state. We have been able to open up 4 branches in addition to our home office, one in Grand Rapids, one in Clio, one in South Boardman, and then a newest one is in the UP at Marquette. It's, functioning greenhouses, which now can offer plants from the local areas as well as the ecoregions that they represent. So uh, we're going to try to make this a little quicker than normal. So I'll cut some of the stories out. But at the same time, there's some things that are quite important that we talk about. Let's see, how do I get my screen back so I have control of it?
We see your screen right now, and
But
I see your
I
mouse.
can't
So
forward it.
try clicking again.
Oh,
Hmm.
so if you want to forward it, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. I will take over your screen
Yeah.
share. Just taking a sec. Oops. There we go. Oops. Okay, I believe.
So we can go back to the next one is fine.
There we go. All right, go ahead.
So there's a couple things that if you have no idea what to do with native plants, there's some documents out there that you can get a hold of that make the job so much easier. Prairie Moon has a catalog. You can go to prairiemoon.com. Prairie Nursery also has a catalog, but I prefer the Prairie Moon because they have in them a cultural guide. I don't understand what's happening here. But in that cultural guide, it'll walk you through everything as far as the wildflowers go, from the type of plant it is, whether it's an upland transition or a dry species, wetland species. And then it goes into how much moisture it requires, and it gives you the range of moisture. So there's some plants that can go from full moist to full dry. There are some plants that only can take dry soils and some can only take wet soils, but it tells you that. The problem with using these guides is that you have to know the scientific name because that's how they reference it. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, because it's important using scientific names because that's the only way you'll know what plant you're getting. Common names are different throughout the state. In fact, they're different throughout the counties because common names are given just because of what people see. Like gray-headed coneflower is also called yellow coneflower, which is also called tall coneflower. But the only way that you know what you're getting is by using the scientific name of Retibita pinnata. And so that helps you because then it also tells you whether or not it's a cultivar. A cultivar, what we're seeing is they've taken native plants and they've cross-pollinated them with other plants where they get a certain feature or function or color, but something's lost in that translation. And so it may not produce seed for the birds. It may not produce viable seed for making that plant continue on, or it may not be something that's strong enough to deal with what Michigan throws at it as far as weather goes. So it's important that we look at Michigan native plants, Michigan genotypes specifically, so that we know that those plants belong here. A black-eyed Susan that's in Michigan isn't the same black-eyed Susan that's from Arizona. In Arizona, it gets a trigger planted in that seed that tells it under the conditions that it will grow. But in Michigan, those aren't the same conditions. So if I take Arizona seed and plant it here, they may germinate, but they're not going to live. And we find that they just disappear because Michigan has different requirements, and that seed knows that, or that plant knows that because it's built into that plant's history. So in this guide that it gives you, it even tells you how much light it needs, its height, its color. And then of course it gives you, and then its bloom time and how long it blooms. But then it also gives you the scientific name. And what's interesting is when you go to look for a plant that it's got a scientific name like Ratibula pinnata, if there's another name in quotes behind it, that tells you right away that it's a cultivar. And we don't like to use cultivars just because of the 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 problems that they do present in the garden for us. Further on the chart, then it tells you how many seeds there are per ounce. And so it kind of helps you because, like, I'll pick on the black-eyed Susan where there's 92,000 seeds in 1 ounce. And so buying an ounce of black-eyed Susans may not be your best interest because you'd have one plant for every square foot for 2 acres. So you want to back off from that, and then you can buy just a smaller portion. So this guide really does help you. It's a tremendous guide because this is one that's about 10 years old that's on the screen, and it is morphed into a very handy tool. So let's go to the next slide. So this is why we use native grasses, is because one, they can deal with whatever Michigan throws at it, especially now. This is the perfect indication of what's going on with all of the plants, with how warm it was in February. We get the thaw, and then the melting, the snow, the standing water, and then it freezes 2 weeks later. A lot of plants would die as a result of that, but these native plants, they don't care. They can deal with it. And so they are very forgiving of what can happen to them. They're very drought tolerant. They can outcompete weeds, but not necessarily invasive weeds. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. They do require less maintenance. And then you can take a look at their grasses. The grasses, they have extensive root systems that can actually filter out a lot of impurities and also help with soil erosion. We use native grasses on brownfields where the soil has been contaminated. They actually take all of that up and hold it in that plant so that now we can safely landscape around that area. They require less fertilizer and pesticides. In fact, we don't use fertilizers or pesticides at all on our plants. And we now even put those over drain fields because we find that the roots do not interfere with the drain tiles. I think there's a slide coming up that I'll show you why. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and even Michigan has done tests on all of these, and they do not interfere with any agricultural tiles that are below ground. The grasses also take carbon out of the air, put it into the soil. But the most important part of what the wildflowers and the grasses do is that they provide cover and food source for all the critters, from songbirds to snakes to reptiles, everything. They provide nesting cover and resting cover, the escape from predators, thermal protection during the wintertime, because a lot of these are clump grasses and clump flowers, and they stay rigid throughout the winter. And so they provide that wind cover and then protection from snow. And then their seed that they produce become extremely good food sources. And we're now finding that we can use the grasses for foragers for cattle and horses. We stay away from switchgrass because it is toxic to sheep and horses, but everything else is fine. Next slide. So here's the important part. This is what Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, talks about. The relationship between native plants, insects, and critters, all critters, from, snakes to herps to even the mammals. But we'll just pick on the songbirds. If they're so dependent upon the insects for a food source that if the insects go away, then the birds go away. And we're seeing a lot of that because the native plants are the ones that provide the food source for the insects. And then the insects would then become the food source for the songbirds. In Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, and his second book, I can't remember the title right now. He has 3 in series right now. One is Bringing Nature Home. One is the book that talks about what you can do in an urban setting and how putting in a butterfly garden is more than doing nothing. And then the third is about oaks and their importance to the habitat in general and what they can provide. But if you take the native plants out of the picture, you see the insects going away and then the critters going away. The insects can relate to these plants because they identify with the pheromone of the plant. So like when a monarch is going out into a field, like in our back 40, how does that monarch find the milkweed that isn't even flowering yet? It's because that plant's putting out a pheromone, and that monarch can hone in on that plant and find it and then lay its eggs on it. And so all of these things are tied closely together. And if we break this chain, we break the whole thing. So it's an interesting series of things to watch for. Next slide. This is the one that's very interesting because this is basically the root system of a prairie. And you can see the diversity above ground as well as the diversity below ground. The grasses are fibrous, they're deep. You can see the scale goes from 0 all the way down to 15 feet. And so the fibrous root systems that are there are for absorbing and holding soil, absorbing moisture and holding soil back, where the plants have these long penetrating root systems that go deep, deep, deep into the soil. A prairie can absorb 7 inches of rain per hour. That's a lot of rain. But that left side of the screen is your lawn, the very far left. And that lawn, if I just look at the root system alone, it tells me right away that I have to care for it. I've got to feed it. I've got to water it. I've got to make sure that there's no pests that get in it. So it becomes another dependent. I don't need another dependent. And so this becomes an issue. This can only absorb a 1/2 inch of rain per hour. So if we get a 3-inch rain, which isn't hard to get in Michigan, then 2.5 inches of that rain washes off of that lawn, because once that lawn is saturated, it acts just like a hard surface. And so then whatever is put on that lawn washes off and goes right straight back into the drain, which dumps right straight into the rivers. And so we have to be careful of what we do with all of this, because it does have impact, especially when every neighborhood has all these beautiful lawns and the neighbors each compete with each other to make sure that their lawn looks prettier than the next one. And so whatever you put on it is going to end up in our water system. We try to avoid that. But 7 inches of rain per hour is a lot of rain that these systems can absorb. Then the other important part of this is how do you restore the groundwater table when all of it is now being quickly taken away from the surface, because we don't want it standing in our yards, and the ground is completely covered with concrete or with lawns or some kind of impermeable surface. And so it doesn't get a chance to get down into the ground and recharge the groundwater table. Next slide. So we can use these wildflowers in any setting, whether it be a shade garden, just a regular garden, or a rain garden. Next one. We always look at several different things when it comes to site preparation, but soil and soil pH is important. We want to know what kind of soil it is, and then we want to know what is the pH. And the pH range for most native plants is 5.5 to 6.5. If we have that, then we're happy. But we need to know what kind of soil we have. And so we do our own little hand soil test. And that's grab a ball of it, squeeze it, and see if you can if it stays into a ball. If it does, that tells me it has a little clay in it. What color is it? Is it white, pure white, or is it a dark color? If it's pure white and it doesn't go into a ball, it's probably all sand. Well, that tells me right away I've got issues that I've got to work with. And then if it's got clay in it, then if I try to squeeze it between my finger and my thumb and it breaks off at about 3/4 inch, I've got a perfect loam. And so if it continues for about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, then obviously it's got a lot of clay in it. And I'm going to have to deal with that, because clay holds moisture. It does hold nutrients in, but it doesn't allow the moisture to seep out. And then I also check, I put a little water, I even spit on my finger with the soil and rub it between my finger and my thumb. If it's slimy, then there's probably lots of silt in it. And that tells me again that that silt will plug all of those pores that that soil moisture is trying to get down into the ground, and it stops that from happening. But then again, it also holds the nutrients in the soil. If it feels gritty, then it's got some capabilities to perk the soil, perk the water down through the soil. We look at light, we look at moisture level, slopes, but we also look at existing vegetation, and we concentrate on invasives, things like uh, crabgrass, quackgrass, spotted knapweed, and Canada thistle. Those are biggies because those don't just get out of the ground easily. You can't dig them out, move them, because they have little pieces of root that if they break off, they become a new plant. So we work on site preparation by removing existing vegetation. We either burn it, which we do use fire on occasion, or we cultivate it, but we don't cultivate it down more than 2 inches. We don't want to bring up any seeds that are lying dormant below the surface as much as we possibly can. And we do use herbicides or a combination of all of the above. And we'll do the whole site preparation process in in advance of planting instead of the day before, because we want to make sure that we get a chance to kill all of this stuff that has been lying dormant below the surface for a long period of time, and then making sure that we can remove the competition, the serious competition, from our gardens before we put the plants in. The most success you can have is by doing site preparation, and the more site prep you can do, the better it is. Next one. So when we look at our house, we have a southern aspect, sun in Michigan. So we always have a shade area on the north side of the house. That's a perfect spot for water gardens and shade plants like the trillium and the ferns and some of the other short grasses that we have that can grow in the shade. And then we shift to the east side. It's cooler sunlight. We can get away with still putting in some um, uh, Trillium and Jacks and other things like that because it's not really hot sun. And then we move to the front, the south side, where there's where we put our butterfly gardens because they're cold-blooded. They need to warm up. And so we need full sun exposure. And then we go over to the west side. And this one is unique because it becomes the hottest garden in around the house because of by the time the sun gets to that position on the west side, it's now at its peak temperature, and it's then radiating heat off of the building onto the garden. And so we have to make sure that we plant the right plants in that area because it does become hot. And if you look now, you'll probably see the gardens that you've already planted coming in first in the year because of the sun effects on that. Okay, next one. On our rain garden designs, we still use native plants, and it's not a problem. We like to make ours about 3 foot deep, just so we can put taller stuff inside. And I won't go into this too much because Matthews covers this in great detail. But one thing we do not do is what's in the bottom left corner of this slide. We do not amend the soil with compost. We do not amend the soil with masonry sand. It's just not necessary for native plants because we match the plant to the soil type. So if it's a clay-based soil, we find plants that can live in clay. That's what that catalog cultural guide will tell you about what that plant can deal with. And then all of this compost is just additional nutrients that the plants do not need. And in fact, the ones that compete with them will use it faster than the native plants, and as a result, will present a bigger problem. And then we don't add the masonry sand. Those are two expenses that just aren't necessary. This was designed basically for cultivars in a rain garden. Next one. So for installation, we'll use seed for great big areas. It does take longer to become established, but it's something that you can sit down and take that catalog and actually plan out a garden and figure what you want. But we use plugs, which are 2 inches by 4 inches deep. and they're usually second-year plants. A lot of them can be first-year plants, and they will flower the first year, but most of them will be second-year plants. We use those on medium-sized projects. They're a little more expensive, but they give you results. And if you're going to do a large project, plugs are the best to go. And if you want to try to cut back on some of the amount of money that you're going to spend, you could do half plugs and half seed. And so you get some kind of reward for it. Quartz are just a regular plant that you would buy in a nursery. And they're mature plants. There's no waiting. You just put the cord out, lay them all out as you wish, and then just look back to see if you got the spacing the way you want, and then just go and plant them. The rule of thumb that we use is 1 wildflower per square foot and 1 grass for every 3 square feet. Now, a prairie is normally 70% grasses and 30% wildflowers. We flip that around. We want the show, we want the impact, but at the same time, we want the diversity because of the mix of wildflowers and grasses. So we go with 70% flowers and 30% grasses. Okay, next slide. For maintenance, we do it now before the spring starts. We let the stubble all stand because 1, it becomes cover for critters, and 2, it becomes a food source too. So yearly remove the litter by either mowing it, burning it, or weed whipping it and raking all the thatch off. And we do that now before it greens up. On larger plantings, we'll only do a third of it at a time. And what that does is it reduces your maintenance that you have to do. And then it also provides part of no litter in one section, 1 year's litter for another section, and 2 years of litter in the third section, because critters need different litter bases in the habitat they go into. And so you'll see that you'll actually draw in different kinds of critters in each one. And so the important part, though, is that we don't let it go longer than 3 years, because as the litter, the thatch, starts to become thicker and thicker, it insulates the ground and it slows your growing season. And so what happens is the ground stays frozen underneath all the litter well into spring. And then the plants will start to grow after it finally warms up, and then they push through it. But you'll see the plants reduce in size, and they may not even flower, whether it be grasses or wildflowers. They won't flower, and they'll be short because they've got a reduced growing season. So we remove the thatch so that we can get the ground to warm up, and then don't let it go any longer than 3 years. Next slide. We do use fire. Yes, we burn in Ann Arbor. There are places that are dependent upon the fire, and yet at the same time, safety is the bottom concern. It removes the litter, it sets back succession, and it increases the soil temperature because it leaves a black ash, which absorbs the sun and heats the soil up quicker. And so this whole process starts faster. We do spring and fall burns. Spring burns tend to favor grasses. Fall burns tend to favor wildflowers. There's always a fire break. They get the necessary permits, and then a plan's in place. Now, if people don't know what they're doing, we recommend they don't burn. But at the same time, they can go to the Michigan Fire Council website, and there are people listed on there who can do prescribed burning. Like I said, they still are burning in Ann Arbor on a lot of these 1 or 2 acre plots that are out there that are basically grassland fields. Next one. Weed competition is a problem. This is one that is probably typical for an urban site, and this is a result of not doing proper site planning and site prep, to where you controlled everything beforehand and then planted into the site. You can see that there's grasses, good grasses. There's some coneflowers in there. There's lots of other things that are good, but there's all kinds of competition that we don't want to have to deal with. And these become major competitions, and they choke everything out. So we need to deal with this in advance. So what we'll do is, when we're ready to do our site preparation, we establish ourselves a planting date. And May 15th is, say, the planting date. So we know that site prep is going to have to be done a couple weeks in advance. So now that we have this date in mind when we're going to have to plant, and so we back it up 2 weeks so that now the 1st of May, we're going to do our site prep. And if it's been a fallow site or it's got problems like this photo has, then maybe we'll back it up even 2 to 3 weeks before that, and we'll do 2 treatments on it before we get into putting our plants that we're paying money for into the ground and then have to worry about all these weeds that are going to be there. Because these weeds are just going to continue, and they're just going to continue and make your job a mess. So it's best to get them under control when you can. Next slide. So the plants that we put on the north side of the house are a lot of the rescue plants that we see a lot of. The trillium, both the red and the white, the hepaticas, the bloodroots, the jacks, and the ginger. Ginger's an excellent ground cover. The deer don't eat it. It can grow in extremely dry sand in extremely zero light conditions, underneath pine trees behind a garage. And so it's very good for that. And it just thrives. It doesn't have a root system that goes very deep, but at the same time, it does what you want it to do. And it's a very attractive ground cover. Bloodroot is another one in the spring that pops up, and you can see it just scatter in between the ginger. The paddock is the same way, and same thing with the jack and the pulpits. Next slide. Wild geraniums will grow anywhere, full sun, full shade, but it's got to be dry soil. It can't be wet. One of the nicer ones, the woodland phlox, is one that can take deep shade, and it's got this beautiful pastel blue, light lavender flower, and it's got a scent that smells like perfume on very heavy, cold days. So these will actually form ground covers over a period of time, both the geraniums and the phlox. And so it's very attractive to a landscape. The ferns, there's so many of them, but the ones that we like to pick on are the lady fern and Christmas fern and the maidenhair fern. And so those are all very good ferns to use. And so these are all typical for the north side or the east side of the house. Next slide. If you get into some more moist soils, the cinnamon fern, the interrupted fern, the ostrich plume, the wood fern, the royal ferns, those are all good ferns. They're tall, but at the same time, they do give the diversity and texture to the garden. And the ostrich plume, the ones you can eat the fiddleheads on in the spring. And so there's just more texture to the garden that you want to bring. And so it's one that we don't see the problems with the deer eating the ferns too much. But at the same time, if they're starving, they'll taste anything. So next slide. New York fern is another one that's dry and not very tall, very attractive, very delicate leaf pattern. I don't know that I would put May apples in an urban setting because they tend to be aggressive and take over a lot, but Pennsylvania sedge for sure, full sun or full shade, and it's also called the oak sedge. This is one that it only gets about 6 inches tall. You can walk on it. It's tufted and doesn't require any water at all. And it can be pretty aggressive if you want to establish like a lawn or a walking area. It's very nice for that. Next slide. Some of the grasses, the bottlebrush grass and the Virginia wild rye, those will grow in deep shade. And so the bottlebrush is a nice clump grass and doesn't get very tall, maybe 2 feet. And it's a nice breakup of the pattern in a wooded, shaded area. We have 2 Virginia creepers, one that stays on the ground and one climbs trees. They both turn red like this. But unfortunately, associated with Virginia creeper is poison ivy. And so you have to be careful what you're working with when you put these out. Next one. This is what we prefer to see in a woodlot instead of a mowed lawn. Thermoweed, the tall bellflowers or the other anemones like Canada anemone form beautiful ground covers. And it's good for critters. It's good for the habitat of the woodlot itself. And you can make walking trails throughout the woods with the pen sedge so that it stays open and it's no maintenance. Any questions? Okay, next one. Some of the grasses that are native that we use a lot of are little blue stem, not very tall, comes in kind of a bluish green in the spring and then turns bright red in the winter. Big blue stem up to about 7-8 feet, depending on the soil conditions. Indian grass is the more delicate and the probably the most attractive of the taller grass species, where it's got a nice big feathery plume on it. Prairie dropseed, one that you can put along borders of sidewalks because it can take some higher pH soils from the leaching of the lime from the concrete. Usually a double row is a real nice border along a walkway, and it's a fountain type grass. Turns an orange color in the fall, so it's attractive in both in the spring and summer and in the fall. June grass flowers in the June, likes it to be dry and maybe 15 to 18 inches, but it's another short clump grass. Switchgrass up to 5 feet. This is what we use for buffer strips along rivers and steep banks. Will form a giant wall, and it's very good to put in for critters because that reddish tint that you see on it is actually the flower, and then it goes to a millet type seed. So the birds feed on that. You can have deer, turkeys standing in it, and you can't see them standing in next to the cluster of this. It's so thick. And this is so fibrous as a root system is that if a wall of water came through, it would slow the water down. It would allow the sediment to filter down to the ground where the plants now could use whatever's there. It cools the water off, and by the time it gets to the stream, it's clean and it's cool, and it's one that we prefer to use for a good buffer. Next one.
Actually, Vern, I've got a question that I think probably we better take it now. It's
Okay.
about Pennsylvania sedge. So going back, where did we have pen here?
Yep.
Here we had pen sedge down here.
Yep.
Therese asked whether or not you can use Pennsylvania sedge to replace full sun lawns.
Yes, you can. And it's one that spreads by rhizome. I don't know if anybody's ever familiar with buffalo grass. They do the same kind of thing out west with buffalo grass, where it's a native grass that you can plug into an area. You can't get the seed for it. It's got to be put in by plugs, or you get the plugs and you break them up into pieces, and then you can plug those pieces in for your lawn. But yes, it's a replacement lawn. We did one up at Lake Ann. Unfortunately, the maintenance crew that came in to take care of his lawn didn't know what it was, and they sprayed it and killed it all. And so it was unfortunate, but yeah, he put like 100 plug flats of pen sedge in. It was gorgeous, and he met his goal. He didn't want to water anymore. He didn't want to mow anymore. And then he changed maintenance crews on it, and they took care of it for him all right. So, but yes, it's a good shade. Complete shade or full sun, doesn't matter. Okay. It just doesn't want to be wet. This is little blue stem, and you can see it's very attractive, and it tends to stay standing throughout the year, even withstands a lot of snow. You can see it's a reddish color, and it stays that color all the way through winter until the snow sun fades it out to a tan color. But it's gorgeous because it's got that fluff on it that looks like it's covered with frost. The left photo is a native prairie that's down in the Allegan area, but this is a landscape pathway around a house where they've used little blue stem, and it's very nice. Attracts a lot of good critters. At the same time, looking good. You don't have to do anything with it. That's the best part. Next. Some of the flowers, what we promote, we try to get this as many as many of the flowers that have florets on them, you can see that the blazing stars and the milkweeds and the goldenrods all have little florets, but in large clusters. Horsemint's the same way. All of those little florets are inside underneath those petals that are colored. And we do that because the pollinators really prefer this. The butterflies really prefer these because they can land on the plant and then just go from flower to flower walking there instead of flying from flower to flower on a single plant. And so we have a prickly pear cactus, and it's gorgeous when you plant it. It's got to be in dry sites, but that's the flower. It's about the size of a hardball, and it closes up at night and opens back up, and then it does get the prickly pear that you can make jelly out of. Critters eat it, and so it's excellent food source for them. The blazing stars, amazing for butterflies. We have about 5 or 6 blazing stars. They're all different varying heights, from 15 inches all the way up to 3 feet. So somebody asked a question about goldenrod is a noxious weed. That's Canada goldenrod when you let it go, but in a formal garden, goldenrod is a necessary part because it's a fall nectar plant. And so I
Yeah,
think that, go
I'll
ahead.
pipe in, Vern, with Megan's comment as well. I haven't seen Plymouth Township's noxious weed list. I think Vern's probably right. It's probably just one, but I will say that we planted it in the Plymouth Township Park rain garden. So there's an example of goldenrod on township property now. So that helps any conversations about goldenrod. And then Vern, there are 2 other questions backlogged. Patty asked about the grasses that you were showing. Can deer eat any of these grasses? And I'm sure generally folks would be interested about deer tolerance.
Deer will eat the grasses, but not to the point where they eat them right down to the ground. They're browsers, remember. So they browse on a plant and they move on to the next one. And they do eat some of the grasses, but not to the point where they take them down. It's not a primary food source for them. The cool season grasses are what they want right now, because that's what's coming up. So the bromes and the fescues are what they're feeding on. But they will get into some of the other grasses, like the Canada wild rye, the Virginia wild rye, but it doesn't harm those grasses. Actually, it stimulates them to grow more because you're clipping them. And so it does become a food source, yes.
And then one other question from Therese: can the ground be prepared without using herbicides?
It can be, but we don't have a warm enough year in order to solarize it. It just doesn't work, especially with things like Canada thistle, spotted knapweed. It just won't work. And we've tried it. We've done it as many times as possible. We even put cardboard down and cut holes in it, and it stops the plants from growing because the cardboard becomes impenetrable, and so the moisture doesn't get down to where the plants belong, and we end up having to tear it out. So yes, we have to use the herbicide, but we use it very sparingly, and we use a specific one that has a short half-life, which breaks down in a very short period of time.
Hey, Vern, I'll add on to that with the cardboard, just based on my own experience at my home. One thing that homeowners have as an opportunity that professionals don't is time. With a professional, you're coming in, you're getting a job done, and you're leaving. So I had success at my home with cardboard where I laid it down in the fall of the prior year, and then waited 6 months until the next spring and planted at that time. By that time, the cardboard had broken down fairly well, and moisture was able to get through it just fine, and it killed the turf. So turf was susceptible to it. I can't say whether some of the tougher weeds that Vern is talking about would be susceptible to that. So that is one way that has been working in my gardens.
And you can get rid of turf. That's not a problem. The problem comes in the quackgrass, because it just goes lateral. And the same thing with the thistle, and not the bull thistle, but the Canada thistle, because it's got another lateral root system. And so the spotted knapweed is another one. Plants that stick around, garlic mustard, it's just a nightmare. And so you've got to be able to do something to get rid of it. And it's not stuff that belongs here, but it ended up getting into our system, and it's just a mess. Remember Robin up at Grand Traverse? She did the whole cardboard thing on a huge garden, and I told her, I said, you're going to have a problem with that. And so she didn't. She did it anyway, and ended up yanking it all out, which was a bigger mess and a bigger job than putting it down in the first place, because she was dealing with the same weed problems. It wasn't the basic weeds, it was the problematic weeds, because they just don't go away. So next slide.
And Teresa had a few other questions, but I think we'll hold them
Mhm.
till the end.
Okay. Bergamot's a good one, but it also is in the mint family. So when we deal with plants that could possibly be aggressive, we surround them with other plants so that it kind of holds them in check. If I put a black-eyed Susan in the middle of a room that's 20 by 20, in 5 years, it's going to be solid black-eyed Susans. So any plant will react accordingly if it has space. So I'm not afraid of the mints, the bergamots, the horse mint. They stay within their realm in the garden, but they provide a very important nectar source, and so we have to use them. You can see that the indigos, we have the white, we have the cream, we have the yellow, and we have the blue. Those are all interesting because they're good based on the tubular flower that they provide. Culver's root is an amazing plant because it'll grow in full shade, grows in full sun, and it's one of those that has the florets, many florets on solid stalks. Ironweed's kind of tall. The gray, yellow, tall coneflowers are the flags of the butterfly garden, but the birds love the seed heads. We have a hard time getting to the seeds when they're formed because they love them. The Joe Pies are amazing pollinator plants. They don't have to be in wet soils, but they can be. But they're tall. So what we found, thanks to the deer, is that if we cut them back at about 3 feet tall, about half of the size, then the plant doesn't get to 8 feet. It gets to 5 feet, and then it has more flowers on it. And we only have to do that once a year. And there's several plants that you can do that with, to where now you can benefit from the flower, and at the same time, you don't have to deal with the height. So the tall ones we use in the rain gardens, right in the center of the rain garden. The marsh blazing star is just one of the blazing stars that can grow in full wet soils. And then just so everybody knows that the wild lupin, which is the primary food source for the Carner blue butterfly caterpillar, which is federally endangered, this is the only color. It's not the Russell's lupin. It's not the yellow or the red or the pink lupin. It's only the blue-white lupin that's the food source. Next. Roundleaf ragwort or the golden ragwort are the first flowers of spring. They're just about getting ready to open now, and they're usually in flower when the monarchs finally return to Michigan. So it's a critical plant for them. On the bottom left corner is the false dragonhead, or the obedient plant, or not so obedient plant if you put it into your garden and it's very rich soils, because it's aggressive. It's a square stem, which is indication of a mint type species, so it tends to spread. So I like to use it though because it's tubular. It brings in hummingbirds. It blooms in August, and so I put it in a bucket with no holes and plant the bucket, and don't let any soil leach over the side so it gets out. And then I make sure it doesn't go to seed. Okay. And then you can still use it. When the bucket fills up, then you pull the bucket out, you remove some of the plants, you put them back in, and it just continues the process. And you can either give the plants away or throw them away or whatever you want, but you don't have to worry about the plants going anywhere. The stiff goldenrod is another good goldenrod because it's flat top now. And so because it's flat top, the plants or the insects can get on it and stay there for a period of time without being having any predation on them. We have 3 tick seeds. We have the sand tick seed, which is the short Coreopsis. We have the medium one, which is the prairie coreopsis, and then we have a tall coreopsis, which is up to about 6 feet, 7 feet, and they all will grow in typical gardens. Next. So these are all wet species except for the purple coneflowers, but it can take some moisture too. But just because the iris can grow in water doesn't mean you can't put it in your garden. Yes, it'll grow in your garden just fine. Same thing with turtlehead, and the same thing with mountain mint. In fact, we test these because of that range of moisture that the Prairie Moon catalog shows us. I can put white turtlehead in sandy gardens, full sun, as long as I mulch it, because it's now protecting the roots. There's still enough moisture there for that plant to thrive, and it does just fine. Same thing with irises. And the mountain mint is the best pollinator plant that we have in our inventory, but it doesn't act like a mint. It doesn't spread and take over the whole garden. It's very respectful, and it's a white plant, which white flowers bring in the native wasps, the blue daubers, the great big wasps that don't bother you, but they look pretty bad. But these are attracted to white flowers. And at the same time, our predatory wasps come in, and those are the ones that take care of some of these nasty insects that we don't want around. We use the mountain mint for, you can make a tea out of it. You can also grind it into a powder, and it's good on chicken and pork. So it's a very useful plant in the garden. And of course, the purple coneflowers, everybody's got them. So it's just, it's just there, and everybody likes them. So it's an extirpated plant from the state. It used to be around everywhere, and everybody liked them so much they dug them all up, and now we don't have any that are native. So, questions? Let's see. You said there's a lot of people who are contractors who can help you with that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Teresa's looking for someone to help with design, so I gave her some support there. The only question backlog right now is Teresa was asking about herbicide. When you were doing herbicide applications, does it only need to be done once?
Yes, if it's done right. Okay. And the thing is that it has to be treated the right way. And the label that's on the bottle is the direction for how to do it. We don't get our herbicides from Lowe's or Home Depot because there's stuff in it that you may not want. This Roundup Extended Care, it's got imazapyr in it. Imazapyr will kill almost everything if you're not careful, and it stays in the soil for a long, long time. We don't use things that have a long half-life, and we don't use restricted use pesticides because it's just not necessary. So we will often make up a solution that's required by the label that's there, and then we'll put on a rubber glove and then a cloth glove, and we will actually just touch the things we want to kill. And we'll do that in an established garden if we see a plant get in there. And that way we don't harm anything else that's in that garden. And you don't get any overspray. You don't get any herbicide dripping into the garden itself. And it's controlled. It's called the glove of death, and it's very effective.
The glove of death is it's a great name for a method. I always appreciate that when it comes up. We've got another question from Rosemary. Is there a way to get rid of bindweed?
Bindweed? Yes, you can. You have to use an triclopyr on it. That's it's not the name of the herbicide, but that's the chemical in it. And we use the glove of death on it. Something to remember, you want to try to treat the plant when it's in its growth stage. So to treat a plant that's established already and is hardened off is very difficult to do. And so in the middle of summer, when we go out and try to treat spotted knapweed, we have to be careful because the plant may not even absorb any of that herbicide just because it's so hardened off from dry conditions, or it's older and it doesn't have the ability to absorb anything in its leaves. We want to get the new vegetation. So many times we'll cut this vegetation off and let it regrow. And when we get it to the regrow stage, that's when we treat it. And that's the best way to take care of something like that.
Wanted to show a picture here for everyone so you can see the glove of death method in progress. This is from the Nature Conservancy. You can see cotton wicking gloves there, and you spray herbicide on the glove and then rub it along the plant. So
Yep.
fun method. Got another question from Lori. When is it best to kill ground ivy, especially when it is growing in a lawn?
Ground ivy?
Yeah, ground ivy. That's probably like, was that like creeping Charlie, maybe similar plant?
Again, it's the broadleaf herbicide. So there's herbicides that go after monocots and the herbicides that go after dicots. Dicots are your broadleaf plants. When they first come up from a seed, they've got two leaves, two cotyledons. And so the herbicide is structured against dicots, or it's structured against monocots. So we have grass-only herbicides and we have broadleaf herbicides. I can take and spray grass leaf herbicide right over top of a fully established flower garden and it doesn't harm it. But at the same time, I can turn around and spray broadleaf herbicide right over a grass lawn and get rid of it. And yes, that will, you can get rid of that through a triclopyr.
I'll add in on that, however, most lawn herbicides that are out there are some variant of that, of a broadleaf herbicide that's going to kill the broadleaf weeds, and I'm putting them quote unquotes for a reason, but then they'll leave the grass alive. However, there's more diversity in a lawn that has other different plants growing into it. So just to say, if you really need a lawn that doesn't have any of those weeds in it, and I'm not going to tell you what's right for your house, but there is value to having some of those weeds, to having more diversity in there, and there's value to reducing systemic, regular herbicide use. So when Vern's talking about herbicide, when Friends of the Rouge uses herbicide, it tends to be a one-time use, and it's a part of a long-term change. So we're killing turf, we're killing some invasive weeds, and then we're replacing it with something that's sustainable thereafter, that doesn't require ongoing weed or herbicide upkeep. Whereas a lot of the issue with lawn herbicides is it's something that's every year, sometimes multiple times in a year, and oftentimes people are thinking, well, it says to do it once, but doing it 4 times is probably better. So there's an overuse, and there's an unnecessary overuse. It's not really producing anything that's environmentally valuable at the end of it. So just to put that shout out there, that ground ivy is, depending on how you look at it, it can be beautiful. Those purple flowers can be absolutely gorgeous. And it's not as good as native plants in terms of the pollination support that's coming from it, but it's providing some support for pollinators. So
Right. And so just remember that if you take something like that out, Mother Nature's going to fill it. And they're going to fill it with things that you may not want. So be ready once you take care of something like that, that you introduce maybe violets, excellent ground source that you could put in, good for butterflies. You can mow them, and they don't present a problem. So next slide. For some reason, everything's shut off.
oops, I muted myself. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was just given all kinds of information while I was muted, and but I was muted. So my apologies. Just a comment for everyone: we are past 1 o'clock, which was the
Okay.
stated end time for the class. If you're up for going on a few more minutes, Vern, that's fine. But I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping for those that have to get going first. So just going to pull up some slides over here. Just a few comments. For those of you that have appreciated what you've heard today, I strongly encourage you to visit therouge.org/member to consider becoming a member of Friends of the Rouge. We are a membership organization, and your participation as a member is really critical towards achieving that, natural beauty right here in Southeast Michigan, having pure Michigan at home here. Also a reminder that coming up tomorrow is Rain Barrels 101, tree planting in Inkster. So if you're interested in more Earth Week, you can visit therouge.org. And then lastly, we'd love to have you evaluate your experience today. And that's how you'll get entered in to win the door prizes for the event. So if you want to go to therouge.org/eval-n, and I'm going to drop that link into the chat. please do so. Please let us know about your experience today. And after you complete that evaluation form, you'll get the link to where you can get entered into the door prize drawing. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. And Vern, I'm very glad to pass it back to you for those last few slides.
Okay.
Current slide. All right. Was that the one you were on?
Yes, that'll be perfect.
Go ahead.
So just to cover some of the last ones, we have tall plants, which are the silphiums. That's the compass plant, the cup plant. We have rosinweed and also prairie dock. These are unusual, very strange, but unique plants. They're the ones that Leopold talked about in his books. And so they're good for critters and they're outstanding for songbirds and pollinators. The prairie coreopsis is a threatened species, and it's one of the few that really is recommended by the Xerces Society for pollinator gardens because of its attraction by the pollinators. And then the bottom right corner is the actual native pale purple coneflower, and there's only one of those sites left in Michigan. And so it's up in the UP, and fortunately we have enough seed that we can grow as many as we need, because we collected some a long time ago and we set up production beds, and now we have the source available to us. Next slide. Blue-eyed grass is actually in the iris family. It's a good ground cover. It only gets about 6 inches, 7 inches tall, but it's got this beautiful blue flower on it. The penstemons, we have the white one, we have the blue one, which is probably 2.5 feet tall. Good for pollinators, excellent for hummingbirds. And then they have another feature to them where they turn kind of a reddish color in the spring and the winter, or in the late fall, as a preservative, stop them from freezing. Beautiful red, deep red color. And then we have the hairybeard's tongue, which is only about 15 inches tall, and it tracks the bumblebees. Rattlesnake masters, another threatened species, but it's very nice for, again, that white flower to attract some of the native wasps in, and a lot of the small pollinators like the mason bees and the miner bees. Next one. And then, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but this is the dwarf-like iris. This is the state wildflower. Doesn't get more than 4 or 5 inches tall, and that's the color. It's intense blue. And a gorgeous iris doesn't need to be in wet soil, but it needs acidic soil. Harebell grows anywhere. It's an excellent plant that starts from the middle of May all the way until it freezes. And it's the critters don't eat it. Can take some drought, but it works wonderfully in your garden, in a regular flower garden. Same thing with wild petunia. Blooms from the end of May all the way until it freezes. And it's only about 15 inches tall. And so it's a good one for any type of soil. And then the prairie smoke is one that we can't grow enough of. About 1 foot tall, and it sends up these little red balls, and then they go into a fuzzy flower head. It's an evergreen, so it's a good border plant. Next. And then these are just some gardens in general. There's a butterfly garden on the left. There's a kids garden, which shows lots of activity. There's a rain garden, a prairie that somebody took out their lawn and planted prairie grass and flowers because they were tired of mowing it. And then on the bottom right corner, it's something to do in your woodland area that will be good for critters, as well as reduce the amount of maintenance that you have to do. Butterflies do go through the woods. They fly through the woods all the time. And so having sources for them to stop, rest, and go to is important. Alrighty, I think that's the last one.
All right. Thank you so much, Vern. Big round of applause from me and from everyone else who is still with us. Looks like we still have 29 participants on. So
Okay.
I don't know if you've got any more time for questions, and I don't know if anyone has any questions.
That's not a problem.
All right, so I'll open it up then. If anyone would like to type in any more questions, feel free. If you need to get about your day, thank you so much for joining us. I see Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. And Megan, thank you very much. Patty, very glad you could join us. Maggie, thank you very much. We'll pause a sec longer. I know it can take a little bit of time for folks to type in their questions. So we'll give a sec longer before we close it up here if anyone's frantically typing. I see Sarah Laura, so glad you could join us. Sarah's one of our master rain gardeners. Very glad to have you with us today. Thank you. Noreen, good to have you with us. Thank you. Virginia, Therese. Patty asks, how can I contact for a consultation? Oh yeah, we've got some questions coming in now. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if Patty is asking Vern or myself. Vern, feel free if you do consultations, feel free to share. For Friends of the Rouge, it's therouge.org/store, and you'll find our consultation program on there. Vern?
And we're starting to look for more people to do consultations because right now I'm tied to the greenhouse. I would normally do them, but I can't because it's just way too busy. But we're part of the Native Plant Guild. Within the guild, we have contractors, we have installers, we have people who can do landscape design, growers, maintainers, people who come in and actually do garden maintenance. And so it's a well-rounded group of people, and we're looking for more and more folks who can do landscape design, not necessarily landscape architects, but landscape designs who are used to using and working with native plants.
I just dropped a link to the Native Plant Guild in the chat, which
Okay,
when
good.
I was passing along links to contractors earlier, this would have been a good one to drop along as well there.
The interesting thing is, used to be a West Michigan organization. I helped set it up with Amy Heilman and Tammy Lundeen. And so what we ended up doing is saying, look, we got to have some people out there. And so now it's grown to a statewide organization. So we're able to do more and more as we go along.
All right, I see Lori commented about missing the start. We will share the recording for this in just a little bit. And Lori, I will say, you probably missed me blabbing, so you didn't miss too much. I think you probably caught all the important bits. Rochelle, just saying thank you for hosting this. Love learning to identify flowers. I'm very glad to have you. Yeah, there's such a wealth of diversity of gorgeous Michigan flowers. So it was great to have Vern stepping through some of the plants that are available and used in landscapes. I see Therese asked, are you familiar with the Browstown Prairie? Which I am not.
I'm not either.
All right, well,
Where's it
something to look
located?
up.
Yeah, where's it located?
She did not say, so
Okay.
we'll see if she types it in, but maybe we'll have to do some internet hunting on our own here to learn more about a Great Prairie example. There are beautiful, there's not very many remnant prairies left. There are a few in the country. There's certainly some created prairies here in Southeast Michigan. And some, I think there's some, do you know any remnant prairies in this area? I only know ones that have been planted.
No, I planted probably 10,000 acres in the state, and the remnant prairies that I know of, I can't talk about.
Yeah, secrets. Yep. And we will not ask you to share those secrets.
Yeah, because there's some that are so special nobody wants, because you know what would happen. They'd be inundated.
Therese elaborated, it's located in Brownstown in Wayne County. I live near there, but there's very little native Brownston Prairie left. And that's the case for
That's because they
much
don't
of
use fire.
Michigan.
There's no fire management, and that's the primary reason. But if somebody went in and did that, or even ran a disc over it, you'd see the prairie come back.
Looks like Megan shared a reference to another contractor, which I'm not familiar with that person, but it's good to know more about the folks that are out there. I see Therese followed up to say the Nature Conservancy owns one piece of land, presumably there with the Brownstown Prairie. So
Yeah, you have to be careful because those are their sacred jewels. Those are gems that you don't want to just have the general public stampede over. Seed collection seems to be a problem with a lot of people, or digging plants up. I don't know why that happens, but it does. And so if you aren't familiar with, especially orchids, people will go and they'll dig an orchid up and thinking that they're not going to impact anything, but they kill the plant because they don't bring the bacteria and all the fungi that plant needs into the environment that they're putting that plant into, and it dies.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So I think with that, I think we'll
Okay,
go ahead and
good.
wrap up here. If anyone has a burning question that they didn't get answered, please feel free to pass it along to me, and I can relay it to Vern, and we'll see if we can get you an answer to your question. And just a reminder, if you've got anything else that comes up out of this doesn't need to be the end of the conversation today. If you hit obstacles along the way, please feel free to share. It's one of our jobs at Friends of the Rouge to help you overcome your obstacles as well. So I hope you will all stay in touch. I hope to see you involved in one of the other Earth Week activities happening this week. And let's all give Vern one more time, one big round of applause, and thank him for sharing his expertise with us today. So thank you very much, Vern.
We will be there to help answer questions during the plant sale.
Oh gosh,
And also we'll be at Washtenaws plant sale.
Right, things to plug. That
questions.
thank you for that suggestion. The Washtenaw plant sale, I think, is on June 4th. The Native Plant
Yeah.
Expo, Friends of the Rouge on May 22nd. We're going to have Vern for our draft title for it. We're going to make it a bigger event this year. Is the Rouge Backyard Rescue Fair. And Vern, I need to send you information on this. But in addition to Vern present with quartz and other plants available for same-day sales, we'll also have a number of other partners out there for children's activities and educational tables for adults, as well as same-day purchase options for rain barrels and maybe even some native plant kits too. We might buy some extra, Vern, so we can have some available for purchase. Lori asked what the date is. That's May 22nd. It's a Sunday. It'll be from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And we'll be passing along more information on that via email. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for reminding me of that, Vern. That would be an important thing to mention. So
all right, no problem.
All right again, thanks everyone. I'm going to shut us down. Have a good rest of your day.